بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم أما بعد. Welcome brothers and sisters to Masjid Al-Ghuraba, the Islamic Center, where we will be delivering a talk today entitled A Devil or Devil, the Devil in the Song, or the Devil in a Song, which will be delivered by our brother Abu Talib, Alexander, Abu Sophia, and inshallah we hope all of you will listen very, very carefully to it. And at the end, when he's finished the lecture, we have some very serious advice for you all, inshallah, to listen to. Though this talk will be very serious, but there will be, inshallah, some more advice for you after the talk. Jazakallah khair.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا والسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. First of all, I'd like to thank our family, the brothers and sisters of Masjid Al-Ghuraba, for their husn al-dhan in their brother to deliver today's lecture, which is a very, very important talk. Our lecture today will consist of 3 parts. Part number 1, which is an introduction into the subject about music in the mass media. Then part number 2, which will look historically at the devil in the song or in a song. Then part number 3, the rap files, focusing on rap music and its impact on our culture and our understanding today. So with that being said, I'd like to begin with the introduction. First of all, if you're looking for a lecture that talks about is music halal or is music haram, you're in the wrong place. Because our discussion is not about the legality of music. Is it halal or haram? The premise here that we believe that music is haram by the consensus of all the scholars of Ahlul Sunnah from the 4 canonical schools of thought, from the 4 madhahib. But rather today's lecture is to look at the symbols and the meaning we get from contemporary music today. This lecture is important for us today because all of us have the tribulation of being affected by music. Just a second ago when the Imam was introducing my lecture, we heard on somebody's mobile phone music. So wherever we go today, we find that people are listening to music and people are hearing music, irrespective of the Islamic ruling. And unfortunately, most of us do not understand the negative effects of music on ourselves, on our children, and on our lives. Today's lecture is not for the faint-hearted. If you're somebody who is not used to certain strong words or suggestions, I suggest you leave straight away. Because you're going to hear some lyrics mentioned not because of controversy or to be somebody controversial, but to ring home the danger of contemporary music. And so with this being said, I'd like to move on to the second part, which is to talk about the mass media. The mass media today is all around us. It is the internet, it is the radio, it is the television. All these are forms of mass media where we get information on a large scale, where information comes to many people at one time. And so, if you can remember the last Gulf War, back in the 1980s, it took days and hours for news to reach us, for us to know what was happening during that Gulf War. But recent events that are going through the Muslim world, and we ask Allah to protect the Muslims, we are finding and hearing information instantaneously as it happens. Such is the impact of the mass media. The mass media, when we talk about it, we're talking about television, films, radio, newspapers, magazines, books, records, video games, and the internet, is a very, very powerful means of getting over your ideas. For people to think the way you think, or to share your ideas with people to see if they are susceptible to your ideas. Mass media is designed to reach large audiences. So the news is not just for a particular region. The news is for a whole country, sometimes a whole region, meaning a whole continent, and sometimes for the world. From the 1930s, with the event of mass media, people were writing about the dangers of mass media, about newspapers and about film, and how, in the wrong hands, mass media can do much damage. There was a very famous writer by the name of Aldous Huxley, and he wrote a book called The Brave New World. And in this book he mentioned the dangers of mass media, and he said that the representatives of commercial and political organizations, so those people who represent political organizations and commercial, that is businesses, that is corporations, they have developed a number of new techniques for manipulating. So these political and commercial organizations have developed, have done research and produced different ways of manipulating, that is shaping, getting people to think in a particular way. And they have done this, as he has said, in the interest of some minority, the thoughts and the feelings of the masses. And so this small group of people have been able to develop mass media, as we've said, television, film, radio, newspapers, the internet, and not just produce these things for the common good of humanity. They have produced these things with their own interests at mind. And this is something that we have to keep in mind, that these forms of mass media do not come without a bias. That when we see something in the newspaper, the person writing this article, the newspaper, they have a particular way of thinking. When you read news on the internet, the person who wrote this article, this blog, the person has a particular way of thinking. And as educated people, we may read this article, we may read this newspaper, or watch this documentary, but in our minds, we have to look behind the lines to decipher, to decode what the message this person is sending to us. Because the mass media can produce many dangerous ideas and many negative ideas. If we look, for example, at the research about the effects of mass media, we find some things that are very shocking and very concerning. The American Psychological Association, now this is the American Psychological Association, is not a kooky organization or some small blog or some strange outfit, but it's an international organization of repute. The American Psychological Association, in their report or their paper about violence in mass media, so they, as an organization, they wrote a paper about violence in mass media. This is what they stand for and this is what they believe. Now, this has maybe 20, 30 different points. But let's read a few of them just for us to understand the dangers of mass media if left unvetted. It says, on the recommendation of the Board of Directors and the Board for the Advancement of Psychology in Public Interest, the Council voted to adopt the following resolution as amended as APA policy, replacing the 1985 resolution on television violence. So this is the preamble, the beginning of this resolution. And they state, and here's some of the points. Whereas the consequences of aggressive and violent behavior have brought human suffering, so violence and aggression has brought human suffering, lost lives and economic hardship to our society, as well as an atmosphere of anxiety, fear, and mistrust. So the violence that is prevalent in American and, dare I say, Western society has brought heartache, has brought loss, has brought anxiety. And they say another point, whereas the conclusion drawn on the basis of over 30 years of research and a sizable number of experimental and field investigations is that viewing mass media violence leads to increases in aggressive attitudes, values and behavior, particularly in children, and has a long-lasting effect on behavior and personality, including criminal behavior. So, two of these points, from these many points, the first thing is that violence and aggression is detrimental to developing civilization. That's caused lots of loss and heartache and grieving. And not only that, they state that violence, watching violence in the mass media, does what? It develops aggressive attitude and causes people, if they are not blessed by Allah, to be careful to fall into criminal activity. Another point they say, and that they urge psychologists to inform the television and film industry personnel who are responsible for violent programming, their commercial advertisers, legislators, and the general public, that viewing violence in the mass media produces aggressive and violent behavior in children who are susceptible to such effects. And so they say, not myself as a Muslim, as an Orthodox Sunni Muslim, but they, a secular organization, the American Psychological Association, affirm that particularly violence causes aggression in young people and may lead to criminal behavior. Now, if we look at one form of mass media, television, we find some alarming statistics, brothers and sisters. Things that every single parent should be worried about. From them are this: that the average child spends over 4 hours a day watching television. 4 hours a day. Another important statistic, it showed in a study of 1,792 young men and women that by watching illicit activities on the TV influences them to engage in illicit activities. And I'm censoring it here. So those people who watch the things that married people do on television, they are inclined to follow these things. I didn't say so. But this is from the research. And so we see, brothers and sisters, how we have to be particularly careful in what we allow in our houses from the different avenues of the mass media. And those things that our children and our families are watching. There are some general effects of the mass media. We've looked at specific things. It causes violence, causes aggression. It causes one to be inclined towards criminal activities. But there are general effects of mass media that we see in our society, on which we'll go through them quickly. One of them is what we call the standardization of human thought, which basically means that through watching television, listening to the radio, immersing ourselves in the mass media, that we are inclined, we move towards thinking the same way. All of us thinking the same way. So what is right according to the mass media becomes right to us. What is wrong according to the mass media becomes wrong to us. Another aspect or effect of the mass media is subliminal perception, meaning getting us to think in particular ways.